Hello and welcome to the Outside the Cockpit pre-race show. I'm your host, Sam Donzik. It's a solo crew for today, just me. So there's lots to talk about as we get into, and let's just start with Friday practice. So obviously it was really interesting at the COTA Circuit of Americas because Mercedes were flying in practice one, but obviously as we see into practice two, it was actually Checo Perez who was topping the timetables, who finished actually in P1 for the window. So when you look at that and you look at compared to P1, and clearly that Mercedes is not far off, or sorry, Red Bull is not far off from Mercedes in terms of their actual pace. And it's going to be really close. I think the gap is within less than a second. Now, what's really interesting as well is the actual difference in the race pace that they have. So when you look at the race pace, you can see here, I'll just pull it up. You can see, so the race pace is actually Mercedes is 0.13 seconds slower than Red Bull when it actually comes to the race pace. Now, when we look at the qualifying pace, we scroll up here, Red Bull is about a third of a second slower. So in terms of when you look at it going into head of this weekend, who has the edge? Mercedes may have the edge in terms of grid position and qualifying, but you have to remember Valtteri Bottas does have that 5-place grid penalty. So yeah, if Lewis Hamilton gets pole, that's great. But in terms of the actual race pace, Red Bull is quicker just by the slightest little margin. And I think that's going to be really key when we look at obviously data. And data is super crucial in Formula One and numbers, as every single millisecond counts. Now, what's also interesting is comparing, obviously, after the top two, there's McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, who are a little bit off the pace. But we even saw in practice one that the eighth car in P8 was about 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds in terms of the actual pace, just on pure lap time. So that's really interesting. It just really proved how quick Mercedes was in practice one. But obviously, looking ahead to practice two, Red Bull stepped up it. Checo Perez stepped up as well. So if you go over to this window here, you can see, looking at the practice two results, Sergio Perez topping the time. Lando Norris as well coming in at second place. Lewis Hamilton third. Valtteri Bottas fourth. Daniel Ricciardo fifth. So McLaren's up there just as high as Mercedes and Red Bull in terms of the pace. So I think this weekend is very wide open in terms of looking ahead towards the weekend and for qualifying as well as the race. Now, another point that I want to bring up as well is what's interesting in terms of, and a lot of people might wonder this, is like Valtteri Bottas, obviously, he changed his power unit. So, and you can, what's interesting as well, he changed his power units and he got a 5-place grid penalty and not a 10-place grid penalty. And it's a really weird rule within the FIA where it's after a certain number of a certain number of engine changes, where they basically said, okay, instead of giving you a 10-place grid penalty, we're actually going to give you a 5-place grid penalty because you've changed it so many times, which doesn't seem to make really sense. And that's kind of like another thing that I want to talk about as well, was the Mercedes engine problems that they seem to be having this year. Is now Valtteri Bottas has changed engines 6 times. And it just seems a little bit odd. That is quite a lot for the year, considering you have 3 engines for the season. And you obviously have different components within that engine. But in terms of the actual power units and the IC, you have 6. Now you have 3. He's used 6 so far. And obviously this weekend he's changing just the internal combustion engine, which is the ICE. And he's only getting a 5-place grid penalty. But it seems the biggest issue for Mercedes right now is their engine. And a lot of engines, there's a few teams that do use Mercedes-powered engines on the grid. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this comes down to Friday practice, in terms of the race on Saturday, qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday, in terms of the durability and how that pans out as well. And obviously, Lewis Hamilton is not going to take that penalty because it seems like his issue is his engine is not the problem. And honestly, to be fair, they're not going to do that because Lewis Hamilton is a fight with Max Verstappen for the title. If he takes that engine penalty, he could be set back even further because he hasn't changed as many as Valtteri Bottas, so he would get a 10-place grid penalty compared to that. So I just want to talk about that as well because that was really interesting in terms of the penalty and the Mercedes engine problems that they've been having, because I think that's an important point to bring up when you look at it as well. Now, in terms of the qualifying predictions, my qualifying predictions are, they're interesting. I think as well, and I talked about this earlier when I was showing the telemetry data between the qualifying pace and the race pace. Qualifying, Mercedes look really quick. They're really quick around the track because that's the qualifying pace. That's the quickest the car will be. That's the limit that you can push it to. Obviously, in my mind, Hamilton is going to get pole. Verstappen's going to come second. Then I have Leclerc, Perez, and Sainz. That's my top 5. Now, I don't have Bottas, obviously, in my top 5 because he does have that 5-place grid place penalty. So even if he gets pole position, he'll be boned down 5 places, but he'll finish around 6th. Not saying it's going to happen. I still think that Lewis Hamilton was flying around practice in Friday, Saturday, just as quick. That's kind of my qualifying predictions. And the reason why I would say Hamilton's going to beat out Verstappen is because of that data that says there. It says, okay, Hamilton is quicker. The Mercedes car is quicker in terms of the qualifying pace compared to the race pace. And obviously, when we look ahead to the race predictions, that's going to be something different in my mind, because that's going to be, in my mind, is going to be Verstappen winning over Hamilton. Perez is going to come 3rd, Leclerc 4th, Bottas is going to come 5th. He's going to pass Sainz. And the reason I say Verstappen is going to win and in total Red Bull is going to win over Mercedes is because Mercedes struggles in the heat. We've seen it time and time before. In very hot conditions, the tires do not stand up well, stand up well for Mercedes, but just in general, the Mercedes car does not do well in the heat. We've seen at Barcelona when it's been really hot. We've seen at certain shores in Singapore where it's been really hot, and the car just hasn't performed the same way. Now it's set to be around 32, 33 degrees Celsius in Austin on Sunday, the Sunday afternoon for the race. It is going to be scorching hot. The soft tire is probably not going to be used. It's going to be the medium and hard tire that's going to be used for the race, as well as my prediction. And I think the biggest takeaway for this weekend is this is a good weekend for Red Bull to take advantage. As much as Mercedes have dominated the Coats of America, as well as Lewis Hamilton, winning multiple times and having some domination there in terms of, pole positions and winning races, this is a good weekend because of the conditions and how the track is. If it was raining, it'd be different. If it was less cooler, even for the way it is as it is now into the October, it's still very hot there, which favors Red Bull because they do better in the heat compared to Mercedes. So anyways, and some other things that I was going to talk about as well was actually looking forward to the rest of the season in terms of the title battle as well, and who I think will win going forward. Now, obviously, when we look forward towards the end of the season, we obviously have the COTA, which is this weekend. And then the next weekend we have going to Mexico. Sorry, they're going to Mexico. And then they have Brazil, the Interlagos. So when you look at the next 3 circuits, obviously the first one does favor Mercedes, but the next 2 favor Red Bull. So this is really interesting because if Red Bull can have a good weekend, they can do some damage control. They might win the race, they might not. I'm saying they will win the race because of the tire temperatures and the way that the heat's going to be, and it's just how the Mercedes doesn't perform well in the heat. Then you go flash forward to Mexico and then to Brazil, 2 tracks that favor Red Bull. They have a good chance to get back in the title fight in terms of not only, obviously Max is still leading the driver's title, but in the constructors battle right now, because when you look at the standings, the current standings is, believe 30, it's a 33 plus point gap for Mercedes. And that's a massive gap. And I know it's just over a race win, but if Mercedes continues to do well with Bottas, then what you really have to do is Perez has to be there to help fight. And that's why I think as well, another interesting point as well for this weekend is Perez and Bottas are crucial to this title battle. And we realize as well in the Turkish Grand Prix, because when you saw that race battle between Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez, and Perez, how he was able to hold Hamilton off and hold his tires and he was able to extraneate the tires a little bit more and more for an extra couple laps. That was the key difference, I think, in that race that held back Lewis Hamilton. And that's why he had to pit again near the end of the race, which pushed him back. And then Verstappen was able to take second place, which was huge as well in terms of extending his lead to 6 points or actually taking the lead and extending his points to plus 6 points in terms of the title battle. So what's really interesting, and I think that's why it's super crucial for Bottas and Perez to do well, because if Verstappen and Hamilton, they kind of cancel each other out, right? You know, they get 1-2, they get like first and second or first and second, whatever the order is. Then you have Bottas and Perez, who now are battling in, you know, what a position third and fourth. That second driver needs to get on the podium, because if you have 2-1 drivers in terms of the podium, that is a big difference in terms of the total points. So I think that's a big key there as well. And I think more specifically with Perez, it's good to finally see Perez in terms of Red Bull have a driver that can challenge Lewis Hamilton and that can actually challenge Valtteri Bottas as well to the position, to the aspect where they actually have a battle and they're not fighting so much in terms of points. Now I'm just going to pull up the Constructors Championships right now, the Constructors standings. You can see here. So you can see, obviously, right now the gap is about 36 points. It's like 433.5 to 397.5. So you can clearly see it's a very tight battle, just over a race win difference, as I've mentioned before. But another interesting battle as well that I want to talk about that's kind of underrated, it's gone under the rug this season, is the battle between McLaren and Ferrari, who is just only it's I was like 240 to 33. So just 7.5 point difference between the two teams, or sorry, 6.5 point difference between the two teams. And I think that's really gone under the rug because of the overshadowing of the importance of obviously the constructors battle between Mercedes and Red Bull, considering how close it has been since, 2013 between Red Bull and other years. So it has been super close as well. And I think that's a big talking point for the rest of the season, because even if we go further down to the rest of the races, if you look at, we've got Abu Dhabi's at the end, but we've got Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and then Abu Dhabi as well. And those tracks aren't really known because obviously Abu Dhabi, it's the last race. It does somewhat favor Mercedes in terms of going back down to the last race. But then you look at the other races and you're not really sure how it's going to go out for the rest of the season in terms of the race, because we haven't really raced there. We haven't got a good understanding. But looking at it from the track that we've seen, it's going to be close. It's going to be 50-50 going into the weekend. I think you have to look at who qualifies well, who does practice well, what are the conditions, how are the tires feeling, because that changes everything in terms of the battle between these teams. And I think that's going to be super evident this weekend between the race between Mercedes and Red Bull, along with the other cars as well. And I think that's going to be super crucial. And another point that I wanted to talk about is, well, just going back to actually the Friday practice, was Fernando Alonso. Actually, he didn't get too much time in really in terms of his practice. There seemed to be some issues with the car. They seem to resolve those issues, but it's just interesting in terms of the durability for F1 cars this season, considering it is a super long calendar. And then even looking ahead to the next season, how that durability is going to be affected or not. And whether F1 cars and teams as well can, maintain that durability throughout the season. And I think that's going to be super crucial going down the rest of this season, as well as next season as well. Team durability is going to be crucial for the rest of the season, looking ahead in terms of their engines, the car performance, and as well is the mental capacity of the team, because you have to be mentally sharp every weekend. And I think it's going to be super important for them to be focused on, keeping the mental health of the team well, so that they're able to perform at the top level for the weekend. So I think that's going to be another big aspect looking towards the end of this season, as well as next season. Team durability is going to be another thing as well. All right, well, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out theintermissionsports.com for more content. I've been Sam Donzig, your host, and we will see you Sunday evening or Monday potentially for the post-race show of the United States Grand Prix. And have a nice weekend.